duties. And in addition to her everyday duties, the Board of Supervisors, in their infinite wisdom, and it was a wise move, put her in charge of the fire relief program. Carol Huchingson.
Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. What I'd like to do this morning is give you a brief update on the status of recovery from the Valley Fire. But before I jump into that, I wanted to give a little more background information to dovetail on what Carl was saying, because you might be wondering, what does the Social Services Director have to do with disaster recovery? Here's how it evolved. During the wildfire disasters last summer, I was doing my usual function, leading my department in the emergency response, and the usual function is care and shelter of people that are impacted by the disaster. So we were busy doing that, working out of the Emergency Operations Center, me and my key staff, when there was an unexpected change in OES, Office of Emergency Services staffing in the county. And so when that change occurred, I was asked to step up and serve as director of the Emergency Operations Center, which I did for the last couple of weeks that it operated. This was about 5 days into the disaster response that I took over. And so at that point, I shifted the care and shelter function to my deputy directors, and I began leading the whole operation, all aspects of the emergency response. As the emergency response began to transition into recovery, the next dilemma was who could lead the county in the recovery effort. Did we need to find a contractor or a consultant or some expert in these matters, knowing that recovery would be a long-term process? And frankly, since I had been in the thick of it as EOC director, I felt that we could be better served by somebody who had indeed been in the thick of it. And so I actually volunteered, and the Board of Supervisors appointed me as the recovery coordinator, and I've been serving in that capacity as special assignment ever since. Technically, I still hold the title of Social Services Director, but fortunately, I have a very capable leadership team that is babysitting my department while I am away, so to speak. So why did I volunteer? Well, let me tell you about my own experience in the Valley Fire. I am a longtime resident of Hidden Valley Lake. I live on Powderhorn Road. My home was only very slightly damaged by the fire, but Powderhorn was hit hard. 16 houses on my street alone. I live very close to the ranchos as well. The ranchos are just gone. So I am very passionate about this recovery and wanted to serve in this capacity. I'm committed to restoring our communities. And I have to say that serving as recovery coordinator has been inspiring and heartbreaking and wonderful and touching and get her done and all kinds of things. It's been a wonderful emotional process, and I'm just pleased to have been able to do it. So that's why a kind of old social services director is doing disaster recovery. It would be really an understatement to say that there have been only a few phases and stages to the recovery process. It's an incredible process and many, many, many facets to it. And I thought I'd start with kind of the beginning and then move towards where we are now. So as we transitioned into recovery in October, early October, we convened what we call the Recovery Task Force, which was led by me and all of the county departments that had a lead role in disaster. It included CAL FIRE, CAL OES, FEMA, the Red Cross, the tribes, everyone that had a stake in recovery was participating in this task force. We were meeting weekly via conference call. A whole lot was going on and getting done through those meetings, but because those meetings were happening kind of behind the scenes, there seemed to be a perspective out in the community that nothing was happening. And the rumors were running rampant, you know, the county's not doing anything, etc. And so in order to kind of relieve that pressure valve in early November, I brought our process out into the public. I think it's one of the best things we did for recovery because we now have, and ever since, have had our task force meetings out in public. So we have a working meeting with the public in attendance, and the public is afforded an opportunity to ask questions about anything and everything going on in recovery. And if you've been at any of our meetings, as much as me, you have witnessed the evolution of the issues in the recovery that people are bringing up, the things that people are most passionate about. And there are a lot of them. Earlier on in the process, a lot of the recovery discussion was about the temporary sheltering efforts. You know, at one point, we were all aware that about a quarter of the county's population was under evacuation. It was just an unbelievable time for our county. But even after the evacuations were lifted, we had many people in various forms of temporary sheltering. You've all heard about the Hidden Valley Lake Campground. Also, Canocti Harbor Resort, brought out of its closure status, closed for 5 years or more, reopened for the purpose of housing our survivors. Both Hidden Valley Lake and Canocti Harbor have just been incredible partners. And with Canocti Harbor in particular, we honestly just hope and pray that this reopening of sorts could lead to bringing that resort back online, which would have an incredible benefit to our community, our local economy, all of that. A lot of infrastructure upgrades had to be done to get our shelterees in there, and so we're just hopeful, cross your fingers, that this will be the beginning of the rebirth of Canocti through a sale or reopening by the current management. Our hats are off to them and stepping up. And in fact, they still have a number of survivors there. About 48 rooms are still in use there.
How many people were taken in all, roughly?
At Canocti,
yeah.
At the peak, there were about 81 rooms ready for use. So the
wow.
peak, 150-ish, something like that. Wow. And during those early days, of course, the motels were full, and I mean, every possible resource in my county was gobbled up. So another thing that happened in the early stages of the task force is getting ready for the winter storms. Tremendous amount of effort went into that. Crews led by Public Works, CAL FIRE, and others got out into the creeks and did their best to clear debris. They put sandbags out and about in the community. They set and rechecked gauges in the streams, determining what level would trigger an alert and all of that. They worked on erosion control in preparation for what runoff might bring. They threw wattles around everywhere, and I have to say, as a social services director, I didn't know what a wattle was before my work in disaster. I thought it was an unattractive walk, but in fact, it's one of those things that you see along the highway that keeps messes from happening. Yeah. Debris cleanup has been, you know, from early on in the recovery effort, a major component. And if you saw the newspaper article about that in the past week, over 1,000 home sites have been cleaned now. They're virtually on the home stretch. It was reported at the MAP meeting last week. There were only 92 home sites yet to be done of those that had signed the right of entry form. And those 92, the majority are expected to be done by early February. There are about 20 of those 92 that are going to have to wait until the weather is better in the spring. Those 20 are impacted by access issues that it would make it too difficult for the crews to get in there without tearing stuff up unnecessarily. So the debris removal operation will close around mid-February. The office out there will close, and then crews will come back in April or so as weather permits to finish those 20. There are also about 160 folks that found their own contractor and did their own debris removal according to the same standards as the state program. So the debris removal operation actually is being completed ahead of schedule. It's really been quite an outstanding process. There are still some concerns around debris removal at commercial sites. And there are some that have been done. I believe there are 50 or so that are not done. And in fact, we're meeting with the state tomorrow to get some clarity on what next steps can be taken with these commercial sites. If you've driven out in the Burn area, you've probably seen that the old Hobbies and the old body shop there appear to be cleared off. Harbin, I understand, has been cleared off. There's a hang-up with Hoberg's due to some historical issues on the site. That's one of the biggest ones that we need to put our heads together and come up with solutions. Horace, am I missing others in the area that I should touch on?
That's good.
Okay, thank you. Or Jim? Okay. So again, preliminary efforts in the whole recovery process. Our community development department has had to flex and bend in wonderful ways that I wouldn't have anticipated them capable of doing in order to make it possible for people to live in temporary sheltering RVs and such on their land, their destroyed parcels and elsewhere on perhaps somebody else's land. In the very beginning, when we were still in emergency response, I went and spoke at a big event over at Lower Lake High School, and this was during the evacuation period. And I got up and said with the microphone that we're going to help people get into RVs on their properties or their friends' properties. And after that meeting, I got kind of grabbed and said, "Don't say that. We don't know if we can do that." Well, guess what? We're doing it. We figured it out, and we're doing it. It had to be done. And so again, a lot of bending and flexing to make it possible for our survivors to find solutions. We've also opened a permit center in Middletown in the mornings. I have to admit, though, it's struggling with the lack of staffing and some technology issues that need to be resolved. Clearly, the Community Development Department needs to staff up, get its positions filled. They're working actively to do that. They have some vacancies. But the springtime permit need is coming. And at this point in time, they advise that there are about 18 permits that have been issued for new construction in the Burn area. So reconstruction, I should say.
18?
18. Which with many more to come. But this is just kind of early in the process given winter and the conditions, so we're happy to have those. Community development also had to put considerable energy into confirming the actual destroyed parcels. CAL FIRE had a preliminary list from all of their efforts, but the truth is everything was just so annihilated that it was hard to tell what was what in some areas. And so, like whether or not it was a house or shed or barn or whatever that was gone. And so our community development department has put their boots on and been out there tromping around. And the CAL FIRE number of 1,280 destroyed homes is now more like 1,300 because of some of those corrections that had to be made. On the subject of rebuilding, we've also worked with the donation fund. In particular, the one I'm talking about right now is Lake County Rising. That fund is poised to assist any homeowner who is rebuilding with the cost of permit fees. In most cases, if somebody is insured, their insurance is going to pay for their permit fee to rebuild. But for somebody that isn't insured, if they are going to have a cost, the way it will work for them is the community development will give them a set of receipts and paperwork showing the cost that must be paid for their permit fees, and they'll be able to go to Lake County Rising and get reimbursement for those costs. The county wants to protect owners from those costs. We have also been actively managing the literal mountain, the Mount Everest of in-kind donations. Having never had a disaster of this magnitude, I don't think anybody could have imagined what would come to us with donations. But you just wouldn't believe it. From near and far, truckloads and truckloads and truckloads of things donated for our survivors. So we had to use AmeriCorps crews in the early stages, and in fact continuing to manage and sort those. They've done an incredible job. For months we have leased the 40,000 square foot warehouse at Workrite in Lakeport to store those donations. Our lease runs out at the end of March, so we're in the process of transitioning all that stuff out to our survivors, and and closing down the donation operation here fairly soon. Fairly early in the process, we had to, like within a couple months, we had to say no more in-kind donations because it had exceeded what could reasonably be managed. But still, the donation funds exist, and we're encouraging monetary donations for anybody that wants to give. The Redwood Credit Union donation funds is still operational, as is the Menlo Lake, as is the Phoenix Rising, as is the Rotary. There are a number of ways people can give. Throughout the process, we have been working with many partner agencies as well. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you how wonderfully the Middletown Rancheria stepped up, and in fact is more than a partner. I mean, they're just right there among us, serving the community in wonderful ways. Not only did they shelter, they continue to let us use the space for all kinds of recovery-related activities, and our hats are totally off to them. We're also working and supporting the TLC. TLC is the Team Lake County. It's the group of volunteer agencies that's coming together to deal with unmet needs a little further down the road. And the unmet needs of our survivors are going to be many. Most of the donation funds that have been distributed and also the FEMA funds that have been distributed have all been aimed at folks that were uninsured. But as we evolve through the disaster process, it's painfully obvious that even insured people are going to have unmet needs, because insurance can't possibly cover everything when everything you own is just completely annihilated. So with that in mind, Team Lake County is hosting a survey that is just starting today, in fact, by this group called World Renew. If you've heard about that in the media. World Renew is this volunteer group that does this. They have a relationship with FEMA, and they go around to disasters all over the country, and they survey people that are affected to get a sense of their unmet needs. That information will be used by the volunteer group to prioritize how remaining donation funds should best be used. Because the unmet needs aren't just now, they're going to be in the months and years to come as people go through the process of rebuilding and find the gaps in the coverage and such. We also have been actively working on putting together a bunch of written narrative on public assistance projects that need to be done as a result of the disaster. This list started out with about $10 to $11 million worth of projects. It was submitted this week, the deadline was this week. It grew to over $28 million and 40 different projects. And it just runs the gamut of things. And these are things that we hope FEMA and the state will fund. In fact, it's pretty likely that the state will fund. They're projects that include not only the disaster response itself and all of that, but the tree removal, retaining walls and things that need to be fixed on the roads where all the signs on the roads burned down, water systems, sewer systems that were destroyed or needed because of the fire conditions and what the devastation that the fire left. So an incredible amount of funding coming to the county for all of these projects. I hate to say it, but the truth is, no one would have wished this disaster, but the result of this disaster is going to mean a lot of revenue coming into our county for solutions. And that will be one good result, if there is any, from this disaster. One of the things that's happening now is what I call the March of the image. Maybe you've seen them driving by. An MHU is a manufactured home unit brought by FEMA. I'm sure you're all aware that they're preparing for up to 40 of them to be based at Clearlake Resort. There are about 26 of them scattered around the community already. 13 are at Lake Village Estates in the Oaks, and 13 others are on various home sites. Have you seen them going down the highway? Yeah, catch it at the right time. And the need for more of them, it's constantly flexing number, but FEMA tells us that as of this week, there are about 26 households remaining that would like to get in one. So they may not need as many as 40 at Clear Lake Resort, it may be a lesser number. The reason that number's changing all the time is because FEMA is guiding and directing people into getting into other housing options all the time as well. And they claim that they've assisted about 500 households in getting into rental housing. I scratch my head a little bit when I hear that number because it's hard for me to imagine there would even be that much rental stock in Lake County. It must be that people have gone into border counties or something. Because if you stop and think about it, would there really be that many? Is there somebody in real estate here? Would there really, well, Dave, are there 500 rentals at any given time in Lake County? I wouldn't think so.
No, I wouldn't think so. That was a big effort to convert seasonal rentals and people that had their home for sale, see if they could rent it out for a while. So there was a lot of that happening.
So if you qualify, FEMA will pay rental assistance for you when you find your rental. Also we're at a stage of the game where lots is beginning to happen around trees and reforestation and all of that. As if the fire itself and the devastation it left wasn't heartbreaking enough, the trees seem to be a continuing source of heartbreak. It's just so sad, particularly on the mountain. There are many good ideas cropping up and actually some action plans about what to do with the trees. I think we're going to see major efforts to mill some of those trees into lumber for rebuilding, to convert it to firewood as a humanitarian effort for survivor families. People have ideas for art, all kinds of efforts. And so the whole tree thing is ramping up. Reforestation. There are also efforts coming forth to prepare for putting it all back in. And our resident forester, Greg Husty, who serves on the task force with us, advises that there are 100,000 seedling trees that are being prepared for us, being grown and readied, and will be picked up, and planting will begin in January of next year. It's also that time in the evolution of recovery that we're gearing up to do surveys. I mentioned the survey that World Renew is doing for Team Lake County. Our task force is also gearing up to do a survey, and in fact have started it. And what the county survey is really about is getting a sense of what people's plans are for rebuilding and re-entering the county. We want to make sure that we have the services and businesses and things that people need when they come back. We want to know what people's hindrances are to rebuilding so we can work on resolving those. We really want to get people back into their communities. So our survey, we're attempting it by telephone. If you're out in the community talking to survivors, please encourage them to take a few minutes to take our call. So far we're getting some hangups, things. We really need this information so we can make sure we're ready and support everybody in coming back. Economic development is also a major part of the recovery. And Jeff Lucas serves as the economic development lead on our task force. And Jeff has put together a comprehensive economic development strategy. And in fact, he and I attended a meeting yesterday in Sacramento with FEMA. It was all about planning for the long haul in recovery. And we asked that this plan that has been written be included in FEMA's overall plan. As we all know, Lake County already struggles with high unemployment and a slow recovery to the 2008 recession. And the wildfires have had an even more significant impact on our local economy with businesses lost and things. And this economic development plan covers a lot of topics. It's not just wildfire related, but I wanted to touch on some of the things some of the plans here that we hope will improve life in southern Lake County. First of all, one of the primary plans, is to find a funding source and apply for that funding source to create the needed wastewater system for Anderson Springs. If you didn't know about Anderson Springs, probably the hardest hit community in the Bern area, 200 houses down to 19. And many of those houses were small, older homes that were built very close to the creek, could not possibly be rebuilt in that way according to today's standards because they were on septic. And so a sewer system is needed to get our survivors back in there. The community would have to vote on it. It's nothing that can be imposed imposed upon them if they did not agree. Another thing that will have to happen with Anderson Springs is many of the homes there were very small, and the minimum square footage allowed in building a home according to county current standards is 720 square feet. And some of those homes were smaller than that to begin with, and so at some point some kind of variance is going to need to be created to enable rebuilding in Anderson Springs in particular, and possibly other parts of the Burn area as well. So going back to the economic development strategy, a couple other things of interest, again, in South County. There is a part of this plan includes providing some technical assistance to Crazy Creek glider properties for the purpose of developing highway frontage retail, wine tasting, lodging, and other ag tourism. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing for South Lake County? There's not much left of the glider port now. It was pretty much flattened by the fire, but it's a fabulous location for something to happen. And then, of course, in the plan, to help with facilitating the sale and reopening of Canocti Harbor. And the ramifications of that for our community and our economy countywide are just incredible. So hopeful about all of that. A disaster worker grant has been received as well by our Workforce Investment Board. They're going to bring 300 jobs into our community, short-term jobs. The folks employed in this program, the priority is given to people that were directly impacted by the fire, but it can also just be for someone who needs a job. They'll be teamed up in crews that will go out and do various forms of cleanup. They can also be used for other humanitarian efforts, such as someone is working on an idea to turn much of the downed trees into firewood. Conceivably, a crew of these 300 workers can help with something like that because they can do humanitarian efforts, and that would be considered humanitarian if it benefited our survivors.
And that's your workforce?
Yes, it's operating out of the one stop under the guise of California Human Development Council.
I'll come talk to you later.
And so what the workers in this program can do is they can work up to 6 months in the program, and they can earn up to $14,000 in those 6 months. So again, more boost to the local economy. Local people will be spending those dollars here. Really good thing. The last thing I want to touch on before I try to answer your questions, if you have some, is on February 2nd, our Recovery Task Force is hosting an open house. It's called After the Fire, where we're providing hazard mitigation resources and housing resources. It'll be a gamut of public agencies that can provide information to our survivors about how to deal with their insurance, how to find a contractor, what kind of safe materials are best for rebuilding in wildfire country, and that's just to name a few of the resources that will be featured there. In addition to the public side of this event, we've invited the Lake County Chamber of Commerce to host a private sector side to it as well. And they will be bringing in local design professionals, architects, engineers, and such that can talk to people about smart ways to rebuild. They'll also be bringing in representatives from the local building supply companies, just the local ones, not outside ones, that can demonstrate the best materials. So none of this is going to be a sales pitch for our survivors, but really just information and resources. This event will happen at Twin Pine Casino Event Center on February 2nd. It's an open house type of atmosphere starting at 3. And then that same day at 7 p.m. we'll have our task force meeting. So if you've never observed our process, it might be a good time to come check us out. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's being done about monitoring runoff in the streams and monitoring drinking water quality, and what impact the fire has had on the water.
I can answer the question about what's monitoring the streams. As far as drinking water, I have never heard any concern about drinking water brought forward to date in our process. So I take that to mean there is no concern at this point. with one exception that I'll touch on. So with the streams, one of the immediate things that we did, and I'm talking long before it started raining, just about as soon as we shifted from emergency response, our water resources staff got out and updated and added these gauges in the creeks that trigger alerts when the creeks rise to a level that poses a problem. And so they're monitoring those, they're monitored electronically. I believe there's even a website where you can go look at that, but it's
But aside
know
from
that
the,
website?
aside from the level, what about the water quality?
Yes, as I said, I've never heard any concern about water quality, so I just can't speak to that. Have you heard
Well,
that?
actually, the municipal water systems like Clearlake CSD and Pelham County Water, they're doing it. That's part of what they regularly do. And there haven't been any particular issues.
But the streams, the fish, the delta.
Tom Smythe is going out and doing that
Tom's
sampling.
out there.
They're doing the sampling of the streams.
They're being regularly, Thompson is doing it, Fishing Game is doing it.
And I think the fact that we're not hearing about it at the test level means it's okay.
Also, in like Flint, Michigan, we get our water out of the lake here, and it's already gets over through wells that are groundwater. And I don't know if there's a lot of stream use for drinking water, is there?
No.
So how are the streams doing?
Well, any of us that can tell you that live around the water right now, the rains are coming properly. We've been very blessed.
Yes.
Like right
It's
now,
been
2
staged.
days of break. You have to remember, we've been in 5 years of drought. Right now, it's being absorbed almost as fast as it's raining. It's just now starting to puddle. So if you have probably a lot of runoff, it may start with the next storm or two. But again, they're predicting, I've been watching it, they're predicting this, a rain and then a day or two break. And right now, I think we're just very fortunate that we're refilling our aquifers. So you're not having the runoffs like we would normally have, like we had last year in December but we had 6 inches of rain in 3 days. So fortunately, all of us that live near the watersheds are watching, and it's been very good.
Elizabeth, I live at the confluence of Anderson and Bear Canyon Creeks in Anderson Springs. And as Joan said, we have been truly blessed with the breaks in between. I have water that has gone under my house, prohibited me from getting to my house in years past. I've lived there 40 years. And thus far, we have had no such occurrence. We are anticipating it, and yes, the ground is now saturated, so the runoffs are going to be significantly greater, but it's astounding how few blockages there have been in the rains that we've had, because in the past I've had water in front and behind my house, and the county has done incredible things in terms of putting up K-rails and temporary barriers to divert the overflow, and we have had virtually no blockages. We did have the National Guard come to Anderson Springs and clean out the creeks, and we've had other groups come and clean out areas, and that was at the behest of the Water Resources and Public Works. So it's shockingly wonderful how blessed we have been thus far.
Well, and I've also heard it said, dovetailing on your comment about how the rains we've had these little breaks in between, which have been the solution so far. It's also been said that earlier on, when we got our first rain or two, it was enough to kind of green things up. Originally they were saying the ground is so baked from this fire that it won't absorb water. But we got these little rains, and then we got some warm weather and sunshine, which caused green to pop up in the earth and break that hard shell. So the earth seems to be absorbing more than they thought it might originally when it was this hard.
Carol has another meeting to go to, so we're going to go ahead of time.
Other questions?
About I'm curious about the number of people that are insured versus not insured.
FEMA's data tells us that 80% of our homeowners were insured, whereas in Calaveras County, that they had their fire too, not as big as ours, but still not as big an impact, I should say. There, the number was only about 50-50, so I'm kind of proud of us.
Quick, real estate has certainly not suffered because of the fire. But what I'm curious, and a lot of people are now getting their money. I mean, I'm having bidding wars. I'm selling houses for
A lot of
more
cash sales going
for
on.
more than I listed. And my question is more like the Starview area had 140 customers for water. Now they have 14. And I have a foreclosure there that burnt down, which we're trying to get a lot clearer. I hope they'll do that today. But anyway, are you getting any feel for a neighborhood like that where the whole block burnt down and the trees are just black stumps? And I did see some greenery popping up, but I mean, any feel for whether people in an area like that where the whole block was just decimated, it looks like a war zone, are people thinking of still rebuilding in those areas? Do you have any
That's
feel?
why my telephone survey is so important.
Okay.
Because we don't have any unilateral feel for that. We hear anecdotally what people are thinking, and it's a mix of, oh, I just couldn't live there, it's too awful.
Yeah, I've heard that
it'll be
from
the
some
same.
people.
And other people say, man, we're doing it, we're doing it. So that's, if you hear about the survey or no survivors, please encourage them to talk to us.
I know that
So we
kind
have
of
the
area is going to
answers
be
to
interesting
those
to see if people will buy a vacant lot and build a home.
I would think a vacant lot is going to cost about $1.50,
Well, that's,
under these circumstances.
Fannie Mae will find out soon.
Anyone else? Thank you very much.